So let's start with today's presentation. I would like to thank all of you who participated at our yesterday's webinar, where we provided you with an overview of recent instruments within the UNFCCC for adaptation, communication and reporting. So at today's session, we are going to specific sections of the BTR that requiring information on the adaptation, and we will introduce you and provide some suggestions on how to report adaptation in accordance to the MPGs related to the adaptation reporting. More specifically, I will provide you with the contents of the first three sections, A, B, C of the MPGs for the adaptation component of the BTR guidance on how to report the national circumstances, legal framework and institutional arrangements, impacts, risks and vulnerabilities, and also adaptation priorities and barriers. Also in the continuation of this session, we will have sharing experience on reporting adaptation under existing reporting arrangements from the Malawi, and also some group discussions on existing arrangements on reporting adaptation within your countries. So my colleague, I still don't see that my colleague has joined, but we will continue with our program, however. So I welcome you very much. And of course, after the presentation, you will have opportunity to ask questions. So feel free very much and welcome to discuss on this important issue related to adaptation reporting. For the beginning, again, I would like just to remind you to register for these events, for entire series of adaptation webinars. My colleague Sheila yesterday provided you with the link where you can go, click and register your participation. It's necessary for our records, so please and thank you very much for your registration. Those participants that already registered yesterday do not need to register again. So before I start with the presentation, please just turn on your cameras to make a group photo as a memory of this event. So then we will continue.
Ay, why, ano man taruh di phone? Why taruh di phone? Why taruh di phone lah? Kung taruh ka email.
Okay, I'll make a photo now.
Mahal ba na siya?
Okay, and one more. Just a second. Just a second. I'm very glad to see your smiley faces. So you are doing fine these days, hopefully. Yeah, and ready for this adaptation marathon that we are prepared for you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now I will share my presentation for today. Can you see my screen? I hope that you can. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I will put it on the. Okay, so let's start with the guidelines for the adaptation BTR part reporting. with an overview of the sections A, B, C of the guidelines. So the adaptation BTR guidelines for section A and B seek from countries to provide information on national circumstances, institutional arrangements, and legal framework in section A, and impacts and risks and vulnerabilities in section B. So the information requested by these two sections is actually critical in order to allow the readers of the BTR to understand how your country is vulnerable to adverse effects of climate change and what capacity it has to adapt and to cope with these negative effects. So section A has to ensure that BTRs include description about countries' key characteristics, and this information is important for understanding the starting point of your country for adaptation planning and implementation process at the national level. So the information requested here can be divided into broad categories: information about countries' national circumstances, as you can see here, is requested under bullet point A, and information about institutional, legal, and policy frameworks relevant for facilitating your adaptation, which is in NPGs placed under bullet points B and C. So let's go with the national circumstances relevant to adaptation. Information about national circumstances relevant to adaptation is requested by bullet point A and asks countries to provide information about their national circumstances relevant to their adaptation actions. And when asking this information, bullet point A provides countries with a list of areas that would be covered or can be covered in the national circumstances sections. So these informations are biogeophysical characteristics, demographics, economy, infrastructure, and information on adaptive capacity. This list, however, is not exhaustive, but it represents a good starting point for providing the required information. So in the next few slides, I will go quickly through these 5 areas. Starting with geophysical characteristics. In this area, countries can provide information about their geographic and environmental context. And this could include information about your country's climate, marine land ecosystem land use in your country, resource availability of resources and their security with water, land, and food, and your country's exposure to natural disasters or extreme weather events. So the second area requested here is demographics, and in this area, country can provide information about characteristics of country's population, like size of the population, age distribution, education, livelihoods, etc., and also future trends, related future trends of these characteristics. Also, information about disparities and differences between regional, ethnic, or cultural groups, or between genders, and about poverty, development challenges, and related goals in context of the demographics. So the next area asked for information is economy. It's pretty much clear what this information can include. So the guidelines ask to provide information on characteristics of your national economy, like size, growth reliance on the certain, maybe most important sectors and their future trends. Also, information about differences between different regions, rural or urban economies, development goals also related to economy, like economic group, etc. Fourth area asked for information is infrastructure, and it could include information about key public infrastructure like transport, power, water, health, etc. Also about the present and continued ability of infrastructure to contribute to development goals, future trend and development goals, and past losses and damage to infrastructure which are related to climate change negative effects. So the final area asked for here is information on adaptive capacity. Reporting of this is quite different to the other four categories that I already mentioned, in so much as while it makes sense to describe biogeographical characteristics, demographics, economy, and infrastructure, there are reports separately within their own subsections. In practice, actually, information about adaptive capacity could be integrated across the other four areas as well as being included in its own standalone section. So it can be integrated in other areas, but also it can have its own section. Also, in regard of the adaptive capacity, information that you can provide here may be a bit trickier compared to other areas that we mentioned because of the simple reason reporting on adaptive capacity in a robust way would require countries to have conducted assessments of adaptive capacity for different economic, social, and natural systems described in the country's national circumstances chapter. So in this regard, countries can focus on ability of institutions and systems to adjust to impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities, and also to opportunities to cope with this, available resources and adaptation options in different sectors. In absence of the formal assessments, adaptive capacity could be generally conducted by using simple reasoning, of course, like, for example, widespread poverty in rural areas could be used as ground, as a base to generally infer that adaptive capacity of rural farming systems is low. So to conclude this area, just to say that primarily purpose of providing information about national circumstances in your country's reports is to provide the audience of your report with basis for better understanding the underlying reasons for how the situation on ground that contributes to your country vulnerability to certain climate hazards, and why country is prioritizing certain areas for adaptation and certain types of adaptation actions for implementation. So we are moving towards the information about institutional, legal, and policy framework, which is actually requested in bullet points B and C of the guidelines. In addition to information about general national circumstances relevant to adaptation, the guidelines, MBGs, are looking for countries to provide information about their existing institutional arrangements and legal and policy frameworks that are actually designed to facilitate climate change adaptation. So in that context, the term institutional arrangements is referring to arrangements that exist between actors to facilitate or implement different aspects of your adaptation processes. For example, communication channels, cross-ministerial committees, stakeholder consultation, data sharing arrangements, etc., etc. And governance also refers to how the responsibility for adaptation is allocated between different stakeholders. So which levels of government are responsible for planning, which for implementing adaptation, and where does these mandates of government actors start and where end? The term legal and policy frameworks refer to information on legal instruments and policies that direct adaptation actions, assign responsibilities to certain actors, clarify governance structures, and establish institutional arrangements for the adaptation. Typically, these regulation are actually legal instruments available to countries that form a part of its legal policy framework. And typically, these frameworks are used to operationalize primary legislation by translating in certain areas for specific, for example, specific sectoral requirements. So the purpose including of this information in BTR is to allow audience to understand the extent to which there is a robust legal or institutional basis that enables adaptation planning, implementation, and other related processes, and where the various roles and responsibilities lie in relation to your adaptation processes, and if and where there are any gaps in your country's institutional, legal, and policy frameworks in context of the adaptation. So institutional arrangements refer to how organizations and structures are set up to handle specific tasks or responsibilities. And these arrangements are different from country to country, of course, based on their circumstances, priorities, and the need to inform stakeholders involved in implementing in different initiatives. In some countries, a single organizational structure may be responsible for different areas, while in some other countries, these responsibilities can be divided among different organizations and institutions. In this context, institutional arrangements can be organized around 5 components, like organizational mandates, expertise, data flows, coordination, systems and tools, and stakeholder engagement. So when preparing your reports, countries need to decide to what extent they report on their institutional, legal, and policy frameworks in their BTRs. So over the next few slides, I will introduce and explain 2 ways in which this issue can be addressed or approached. One way in which countries could provide this information is by taking a light touch approach that would involve limiting your reporting to only the key aspects of your institutional, legal, and policy frameworks. For example, providing only a high-level overview of your key acts, laws, or policies that mandate the government and other actors to engage in adaptation. Also of key adaptation policy instruments like national adaptation policies and strategies, and key institutional arrangements, coordination mechanisms for adaptation planning, etc. So providing only key overview of these necessary information. So the benefits of this approach are that it reduces the burden required to prepare the report, and it's lighter experience for the reader, for those who will review your BTR. Furthermore, in cases where countries have already reported in depth on their institutional, legal, and policy framework in previous reports to the UNFCCC, if there has no been major changes, countries could simply cross-reference to these descriptions and instead focus on providing updates in BTRs, updates for other parts of the BTR where there has been progress or change. So, however, the obvious drawbacks in this light touch approach are that audience will only be able to get a basic impression on how adaptation is governed in your country through reading your BTR on its own. So one, quite good example on how this light touch approach can be seen, it's United Kingdom adaptation communication. So in this document, UK identifies and to limited extent describes how responsibility for adaptation is divided between 4 member countries of the UK. The legal basis for adaptation and some key institutional arrangements, those established by the Climate Change Act only. And further, the information on the other side of these links is actually quite heavy and even more than hundreds of pages. And therefore, by not providing even a bit more information, the UK has given readers a choice of either understanding very little or having to read a very large document. So you can see in this figure, these arrows, the legal basis for adaptation is just mentioned here, that it's UK Climate Change Act from 2008. For example, responsibility for adaptation is divided between 4 member countries. It's written here in short. Also, some institutional arrangements are put here with links that provide much more information about their institutional arrangements on the adaptation. So the other way is that countries may take a more comprehensive approach to providing this information. This would enable the reader to better visualize the purpose, strengths, and modalities of countries' present setup and better understand how it facilitates their adaptation processes. Achieving this would involve providing more detailed description of their institutional, legal, and policy frameworks, and could include ensuring that all aspects of your country's institutional, legal, and policies framework are identified, providing more information on the objectives and modalities of specific institutional arrangements and legal and policy instruments, identify linkages between institutional arrangements and legal and policy instruments, identify the actors involved in the adaptation planning and implementation, and describing their roles and responsibilities, and reporting on institutional arrangements and legal and policy instruments that are either planned or under development. In addition, countries could extend this information also and report on various strengths, limitations and gaps on their institutional legal policy framework, for example, highlighting where institutional arrangements are missing or needed, highlighting where institutions are unable or are ineffective at fulfilling their mandate due to different reasons. And such information, however, would likely need to come from assessments from those assessment conducted during the scoping process from national adaptation plans or NDCs. So to quickly sum up, it is important to say that there is no right or wrong approach to reporting on institutional, legal, and policy frameworks. Instead, each country will need to decide on how they approach to this task based on what they want to achieve through providing this information. So we are moving to section B on impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities. The main goal of the section B is to ensure that countries provide information what climate change looks like when within the geographic scope of their country, how their country is vulnerable to impact of climate change, and how climate change and its impacts are projected to evolve in line with future climate changes. As similarly as with section A, the information requested here can be divided in two broad categories. First one is information about climate trends, impacts, and vulnerabilities in bullet point A and B, and information about methodologies, tools used in your analysis and assessments under bullet points B and C on this figure. So starting with the first area on climate trends, impacts, and vulnerabilities, information about present and future climate trends, impacts, and vulnerabilities is requested under bullet points A and B of the section B of the BTR. So logically, reporting in this area would be done over to two steps. First one is describing the past and projected changes in climate that the country has experienced or facing, and describing how the country is vulnerable to and is being impacted by changes in climate, and how these vulnerabilities and impacts are expected to develop in the future. The first step is covered by bullet point A, which asks information about current and projected climate trends and hazards. This information is going to come from assessment of past meteorological data twinned with climate modeling exercises. The reference to both climate trends and climate hazards in the guidelines implies that countries should, if possible, include information about past and projected changes in the frequency and strength of natural disasters related to climate change, for example, extreme weather events, as well include information about the longer-term trends that has typically been included in adaptation-related reports. Additionally, countries could include a description of how the results of the most recent climate modeling are different from the previous attempt, or how has situation actually changed since the last assessment was conducted, and has the situation become more severe, or actually what are the changes. In the second step, it's covered, which is covered by bullet point B. It asks information from countries on observed and potential impacts of climate change, as well to include sectoral, economic, social, and or environmental vulnerabilities. This second part, including sectoral, economic, social, and environmental vulnerabilities, suggests that countries should provide disaggregated information about how key dimensions of the certain country are vulnerable. In practice, this is likely to mean key economic sectors like agriculture, water, health, or human systems like cities, regions, environmental systems, coastal zones, ecosystems, etc. Information relating impacts and vulnerabilities will need to come from impact, risk, and vulnerability assessments, many of which will be conducted by national governments as part of preparing their national communications. So, moving to the item requested by Section B, which is methodologies and tools used in your analysis and assessments of climate trends and past and future adaptation impacts and vulnerabilities. The request for this information is made by bullet point C that asks countries to provide information about approaches, methodologies, and tools using in generating information relating to climate change and its impacts and associated uncertainties and challenges with these approaches, methodologies, and tools. This section is asking countries to be transparent and clearly describe how and where information about past and projected climate changes, impacts, and vulnerabilities comes from, as well to highlight any uncertainties and challenges that are associated with the approaches, models, tools, and data that you actually use. In cases where information comes from institutionalized processes that are conducted periodically, for example, climate projections or national risks assessment that are conducted every 5 years, countries could also identify and describe these processes. Certain approach that is adopted again within an example of United Kingdom adaptation communication. This example provides audience with an overview of information about climate changes and impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities, instead of presenting the results of projections and risk assessment documents. So it's also one light touch approach. And information included in this description that you see on the right side of your screen includes identifying the processes, identifying the institutions and actors that were involved, outlining the scope and limitations of these processes and how they have recently been enhanced, and highlighting when these processes were last undertaken and will next be actually updated. When adopting this light touch approach, it would be good practice to ensure that the report provides links to publicly accessible websites, reports, and your resources, actually resources of information, which then enables the reader to access much more technical and detailed information that is not being included in your BTR report, adaptation part of your BTR report. This information could also include detailed explanation of the approaches, methodologies, models, and processes. So you can see on this right side how it looks like. This is one overview, sorry, where they summarize processes, institutions, outlining the scope, highlighting the processes, and include hyperlinks and cross-references to broader information on these topics. So before I conclude this presentation, I would like to provide some reflections on reporting on climate trends, impacts, and vulnerabilities. Basically, the guidelines for reporting on climate trends, impacts, and vulnerabilities under the BTR have not really changed from these issued for the national communications in Decision 17 CP8. As such, countries should be well aware of what they are required to report in response to this section. Just a second. Sorry for this. So, in any case, reporting on climate change changes, impacts, and key vulnerabilities remain one of the most important dimensions of the national communication for most of non-Annex 1 parties, and this is probably continued through BTRs. It represents an opportunity to effectively communicate to the international community how climate change is impacting your country and how climate change is expecting to continue impacting your country. Also, reporting context of this information is vital for adequately framing information why certain areas have been identified as priorities for adaptation and why the adaptation actions being pursued by your country have been selected. For example, information about impacts, risks, underline why specific strategic approach is being taken by your country. Furthermore, is crucial for framing the scale and magnitude of your country adaptation needs. To do this effectively, countries need to ensure that information provided in these reports is clear, comprehensive, so enough comprehensive, and easy to read, regardless of how robust or technical advanced the assessment underlying this information are. To finish this section, I would like to highlight the Bangladesh third national communication as an example of report that does a really excellent job of presenting the climate impacts that country is facing and its many vulnerabilities to these impacts. Bangladesh's third national communication provides readers with comprehensive and long section about impacts and vulnerability. It is very well a structured chapter that is very effective in presenting on how key climate variables have changed over past 5 to 6 decades and how key sectors and geographic areas are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Impact in specifically vulnerability assessments in these national communications are extremely well written and detailed. As a result, this document provides the reader with a clear idea sorry, of the many different ways in which the sector or region in the question is being impacted and is expected to continue to be impacted by certain climate hazards. These sectoral and geographic assessment do a really good job of communicating the magnitude of impact and risks through good use of statistic and informative visualization, as you can see on the right side of this slide. All in all, this approach demonstrates the scale of past and future climate hazards the size of the areas at risk, and past and anticipated losses and damage due to the climate impacts. So, moving to the guidelines for section C and D, that request information about the forward-looking aspects of your country's national adaptation process, namely information about adaptation priorities and barriers in section C, and adaptation plans and actions in section D. In the context of reporting, providing information requested by these sections represents actually the first step in reporting on adaptation. As such, the information requested by this section is key to reporting on what your country is doing to adapt to adverse effect of climate change that has identified, or your country identified in section B. So in the next slides, I will focus on the section C for the first. So on the adaptation priorities and barriers. The main goal of section C is to ensure that your BTRs present and describe your country's priority areas for adaptation. In addition to this, the guidelines also ask countries to provide information on adaptation barriers and gaps that are or are expected to hinder or inhibit effective adaptation in your priority areas. So, starting with the priority areas for adaptation. This information is requested by bullet point A, which asks countries to provide information about domestic adaptation, of course, priorities. And in this context, the term priorities or priority areas can be understood as a broadly definable areas that have been identified in adaptation planning process as areas for which adaptation action is being prioritized because of their huge vulnerability to climate change or their relative strategic importance to the country, mixture of those two, or their strategic importance in enabling adaptation. So what is defined as a priority area is fundamentally a country lead decision. As such, priority areas can take a variety of shapes and forms. Probably the most recognizable form of priority area are those that are sector-based. These could include, amongst other things, economic sectors, so sectors and industries, policy areas, for example, disaster risk reduction, poverty alleviation, etc. Regions, specific regions, areas and cities, rural, urban areas, or coastal highlight zones, ecosystems, rainforest, wetlands, etc., etc. However, while we have here framed priority areas as sectoral, priority areas can also be cross-cutting in their nature. So in other words, they can relate to areas that are key in enhancing the enabling environment for adaptation planning and implementation. Areas that are cross-cutting could include, among other things, institutional capacity building, strengthening climate information services, resources mobilization, strengthening awareness and knowledge of climate change impacts. So, key step in developing an adaptation strategy or plan, one would expect priority areas to be identified within the key planning instrument. For developing countries, this is mostly national determined contributions, or NDCs, national adaptation plans, NAPs, flagship development plans, or development plans that have climate change mainstreamed into them. While one would also expect this to be the case, depending on specific country, this information may also be identified in other planning-oriented instruments like laws, strategies, white papers, to other policies. As with all information requested by the BTR guidelines, countries will need to decide on how they are going to report on their domestic adaptation priorities in their BTRs. As was done in the last presentation, over the next few slides, I will introduce you and explain two broad ways in which this can be approached. So again, a light approach or light touch approach to reporting on adaptation priorities would be to identify within the BTR the key areas that your country considers to be priority for adaptation. Since any priority areas are likely to have been established by planning or policy instruments, if possible, BTR should identify which planning or policy instruments established these areas as priorities, thereby allowing interested readers to locate this information elsewhere. A good example of how this approach would look in practice can be, again, Bangladesh third national communications, that you can see on the right side on this slide. In this example, Bangladesh simply lists 14 adaptation priorities in the table format, that the priorities that have been identified by its first NDC and its most recent flagship development document, their seventh five-year plan. This we can see in the picture on the right is quite an efficient way of ensuring that this information is included clearly in large international reports. So you can see in this green table key areas identified or prioritized by Bangladesh. So that's one of the approaches that countries can use. When reporting on specific adaptation priorities, countries should describe the priority, including when and where it was set. So statement, plan, piece of legislation, where the area was originally designed as a priority. Also elaborate on why it should be prioritized for adaptation. Also describe any high-level goals or targets that are associated with adaptation priority and inform progress towards achieving these goals. So the next area, information requested by Section C, is on barriers to adaptation. In addition to information about the priorities, Section C also asks countries to provide information about barriers, challenges, and gaps to adaptation, to their country's adaptation. While this term is often used to refer to capacity-related barriers, challenges, or gaps, for example, barriers relating to insufficient technical capacities or finances, countries could also report on the adaptation limits, like hard or soft limits to adaptation that are caused by socioeconomic or environmental circumstances, if, of course, if such information is relevant and available. Information about barriers, challenges, and gaps included in BTR would ideally result from structured processes known as barrier analysis. In these processes, barriers to both adaptation planning and implementation are systematically analyzed through engaging with experts and stakeholders, where actually countries then have conducted such assessments, descriptions of barriers, challenges, and gaps provided in these assessments. Most likely they are conducted during the preparation of some key planning documents like NDCs, or specifically for adaptation, national adaptation plans and adaptation strategies. So probably sources of data are analysis of barriers and gaps conducted during the formulation of your NAPs or adaptation strategies, as well as from evaluation of these plans and strategies during their implementation. As such, countries seeking information about identified barriers could expect to find this information within these documents or some supporting documents. So I will stop now here with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, very detailed presentation. Apologies, I had technical challenges. I think my password had expired, so the process for resetting took over 30 minutes. So apologies for that. So I have a few questions before we can get another presenter from the LDC chair. There was a question, I think it was a compliment from Leo from Seychelles about the definition of hazard, that we need to define hazard. But most of the time, actually, countries have opportunities to describe their hazard. So it is also very important because of the extent of hazards in different countries. But of course, that is very important. And then I saw another comment about do we have to include the output generated by the tools used? So that is maybe the guidance they might need from you. Yeah, those are the only two questions. And if we have another person who has any other question, kindly put up your hand before we can go to the next session. Thank you. Over to you. About the tools, do they have to include the outputs generated by the tools, or they just have to include the results of the assessments?
As I said, it's the out on the countries. So if they would like to report in more details, or if they have all this information, is good to have such information. Yeah, outputs generated by the tools used, of course, and methodologies that you use in assessing, vulnerability risks, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you so much. So if we do not have other hands up, kindly continue using the chat just in case you remember you have a point to ask. But to just also let you know, we are also trying to generate a list of frequently asked questions, and we shall provide professional and technical answers, and we shall also upload this on our platform for further learning and providing information, because we have seen that, especially in this adaptation series, there are some questions that are repeating. So at this moment, I will now welcome the LDC chair, Mr. Evans, to take the floor for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Good afternoon, good morning. And also thanks to our presenter. That was good keynote presentation from Sajana. And good morning, good afternoon to colleagues that are in participation. I thought I should do a different, I should take a different approach. So I will not really make a presentation. I had wanted one of my colleagues at the national level to make a presentation, but okay, he's here. Yamika, I think, will say something because he is our LDC's coordinator for the transparency under the Paris Agreement. So I think he'll say something, but I wanted to just appreciate the presentation that has been made by Sajana. And just to mention that overall, as LDCs, we are ready, most of us, to prepare our PTRs in this cycle, as we also agreed in the previous COP decisions and the CMA, and also coming out of Dubai last year in December. And we have some level of experience coming from the biennial update reports, which a number of the LDCs prepared and submitted to the UNFCCC, including Malawi. And as you may know, adaptation is the priority of these developed countries, and we are very eager to implement adaptation action. In fact, we are prepared to also move forward to engage more in the locally led adaptation efforts or action. This is what we are aspiring to do. We do recognize that most of our communities are vulnerable to impacts of climate change. We often experience the adverse effects, prolonged dry spells, even droughts in some cases, in some of our countries, and also flooding, some heat waves somewhere. So in some other times, as you may know, the LDCs are quite spread in terms of geographical distribution and their experiences. We have for LDCs in Africa, some lying in the coastal zone areas in West Africa, and some in Central Africa, some around the desert areas, the Sahara, etc. And we have some in the Asian region, and of course 3 or 4 now in the, I think we have 3 in the Pacific small island developing states, and these are very vulnerable because they are lying in very low areas. So as we do our adaptation, we might not necessarily have a common definition of adaptation amongst these countries. Some even like Nepal, Bhutan, in highland areas along the Himalayas mountains and very high mountains. They have glaciers that would be melting if we do not address climate change. So quite varied circumstances, and therefore we do also understand that then our adaptation would be very locally specific, and therefore we have to identify actions that are site specific. Therefore, as I said, we will be participating in the preparation of the BTRs, but coming from the BRs, the challenges that we noted were that we do not have readily available data, oftentimes, to segment on the indicators as we would want to do reporting and maybe prepare our project proposals. So data is a challenge. But even when we do the proposals, even adoption of some of the technologies proposed in our project proposals, not every technology is readily absorbed or adopted by the communities, I think due to some cultural beliefs at times, some myths. And I'm aware that like in Malawi, most people, particularly women, do not readily adopt our modern cook stoves for cooking. They would say that if like you want to cook our local food on simmer, from corn, maize, and also maybe beans or so, even beef, it doesn't taste well as compared to that which is prepared using the local cooking materials. So these are some of the barriers we face, but also I think the pricing of those technologies at times is high, so adoption could be low for adaptation. But cutting across, I think the LDCs, we were very vulnerable in a number of sectors: health, for human well-being, forestry, fisheries, tourism, infrastructure, agriculture, obviously, our crops and livestock, energy, provision of renewable energy, and also water resources, disasters. All these sectors are vulnerable. So therefore, as we prepare adaptation proposals, we need to have indicators targeting all this. And we have attempted in Malawi to develop some indicators, but as I said, it's a bit difficult maybe to internationalize this, but we do have them. Regarding, of course, institutional arrangements, you might recall that if we're talking about a number of sectors, each one of these would want to have a place in the institutional arrangements so that their voice is heard. But in Malawi, we have a proposed institutional structure that is placed in our national climate change management policy that we adopted in 2016. And this gives some responsibilities to actors, including the civil society, the private sector, and also the vulnerable groups as we advance adaptation action. So I think this is, I know this also maybe cuts across a number of LDCs, but as I said, we'll be preparing the BTR. One challenge also is when it comes to reporting on the action on climate action regarding support provided and the one that was needed because of the lack of a common definition of climate finance, and realizing that we use a number of sources to generate our financial resources. We have challenges also to account and check on what actually is going towards adaptation action at the country level in the sectors, because some could be ODA coming to maybe some actors like civil society actors. It's difficult to account for what is the private sector contributing. So these are also some of the challenges that we do face. You will recall finally that not many of the LDCs have prepared their national adaptation plans. If you have done that, and therefore it's also a challenge because then if you do not have a national adaptation plan, then it will be difficult maybe to domesticate this into the BTR. But quite a few others also have sector plans, maybe in fisheries, forestry, energy. So we just need to bring this together and then report in the BTR. But again, we are ready to participate, and we do welcome all the support that is coming from every other angle to build the capacity of LDCs, experts in preparing the BTRs. I've seen there are quite some that have been aligned this year, and we'll be happy to be participating in those workshops so that we can build the capacity of LDCs to formulate BTRs and report on adaptation. So this is what I can say for now as chair, and I'll invite Yamika if you're still connected, just to say one or two words regarding Malawi, and then I'll hand back to you, Sheila. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye. Yamikani, if you are connected.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I can see his own. Yeah, thank you. Yamikani, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sheila and Chair, for the introductory part. I think you have talked quite a lot, and I'm attempted not to add more because you have preempted what was in my presentation. But basically, just to emphasize that adaptation is a key priority for most of the LDCs. However, as we all know that as due to its complexity and so on. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you, but we had lost you. Maybe you could consider removing the video. Are you trying to share the presentation?
No, because we have already consumed a lot of time with the chair. I just want to emphasize the complexity of reporting on adaptation among the LDCs, despite
It
this
is fine. Now you are very clear. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, despite adaptation being a priority for the LDCs, I think it's a challenge in terms of its reporting. However, we have an opportunity, most of us, to consider the use of the national frameworks which are available, for instance, the NAP, as well as the adaptation communication. So we are going to really rely on information from there as we are preparing to report under the BTRs. But thank you for this. I think the chair has already highlighted quite a lot, and we'll be happy to engage more with colleagues in that regards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for LDC and Mr. Yamikani for that elaborate. I have taken note of especially the key points, the barriers to technology, the vulnerabilities across the different LC countries, and of course, that makes it very difficult to have a clear definition even for adaptation impacts. At the same time, adaptation indicators then becomes a challenge. I have also taken note that there are clear challenges in regards to institutional arrangements, but of course, it was also noted that countries have tried to put in place some of the institutional arrangements, especially starting with the previous reporting arrangements of the national communications by coming up with teams for also developing the NAPs for different countries. So BTR reporting, it was noted that BTR reporting will be building on those institutional structures to be able to report on adaptation. And then also the other key challenge that was reported was about data, that data is very limited in most cases, and this of course limits the level of analysis that would be required for different countries. And then the other key highlight was about support needed and support received by different countries. It is still a big challenge for countries to be able to identify that has gone to adaptation as actions at national level. And then I also took note of that countries will tend to use to utilize the already existing frameworks for reporting to prioritize adaptation reporting in the upcoming BTR. So that is very positive. We are aware that it's not mandatory, but this really key highlight from the LDC chair, and of course an example of Malawi, it gives us hope that our capacities will maybe help to enhance reporting on adaptation in the upcoming BTR. Also, I wanted us to have a country context, and I'll provide another floor to Zimbabwe to provide their highlights on how they think adaptation reporting will be handled. We are aware that there are still many challenges, but just giving us that highlight, it's an opportunity for us to learn and then maybe to see how different countries can be able to take it on. So over to you, Emily. I hope you are still here. Thank you.
Afternoon, colleagues, depending on where you are, and good morning also, depending on where you are. I'll just try to share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. Okay. Looks like technology is doing what it normally does. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Super. Okay. Afternoon once again, colleagues. Emily Matingo is my name. I'm a principal climate change scientist from Zimbabwe. So I'm just going to build on the conversation by presenting on reporting adaptation under the existing reporting arrangements, focusing on reporting national circumstances, legal framework, institutional arrangements, climate change impacts, vulnerabilities, adaptation prioritization, and barriers. So my presentation will start up from the national communications to say since 2000, Zimbabwe has been developing national communications, which they've been using as a tool to report on their progress in terms of adaptation, in terms of legislative framework, issues of institutional framework, monitoring and evaluation, and other issues. And as it stands as of now, we've recently launched the 5th cycle of the national communications, which is also now then coming with the first biennial transparency report, where we'll also continue with efforts in terms of reporting on adaptation issues. Then you would find that in terms of reporting on adaptation issues under the national communications, we had dedicated thematic areas that gave a snapshot of the country's national circumstances as it relates to adaptation, legal framework, institution arrangements, GAG inventory, the impacts, the adaptation priorities, vulnerabilities, as well as barriers. And moving on, you would find that in terms of reporting on adaptation issues within the national communications, the key thematic area in terms of the national circumstances was that our vulnerability as a country is hinged on the close relationship that is there between rainfall and GDP, so much so that if it doesn't rain, it means the GDP doesn't perform very good, and the opposite is true. So in terms of the national circumstances, it's the over-reliance on rain-sensitive sectors, which makes the vulnerability amplified. And then in terms of adaptation, the previous cycles have covered issues to do with vulnerability assessment. It has piloted hotspots and produced a country needs assessment to enable the propelling of climate change action forward. Then in terms of legal framework, the challenge is that there is absence of a dedicated legislation to support climate change mainstreaming and hence resilience and adaptation. But however, there is a climate policy and a national climate change response strategy, as well as nationally determined contributions which talk to adaptation and reporting. Then in terms of prioritization, though there is need to enhance capacity for adaptation costing and prioritization, we have made significant efforts in the past reporting cycles under the policy framework and the National Climate Change Response Strategy to prioritize key enablers for adaptation, such as early warning and climate smart agriculture. And then still under the national communications, you find that reporting on adaptation is difficult as there is no standardized metric for measuring adaptation within the country itself and even globally. And then it makes it difficult for tracking and reporting those adaptation actions. Then moving on to another tool that we have used is the adaptation communication, where in 2022, Zimbabwe developed its first adaptation communication, which also basically complements efforts that have been done under the national communication to communicate the issues of vulnerability in adaptation. And then the third tool that we have used in terms of reporting for adaptation is the National Adaptation Plan. Zimbabwe has recently concluded developing its National Adaptation Plan, which is due to be launched soon, and it also identifies or enhances reporting of adaptation actions as it comes with an M&E framework. And additionally, also, we are currently engaging the Climate Action Transparency, which is ICAT, for a phase 2, which will focus on enhancing or rather unpacking the National Adaptation Plan in terms of building capacity of national institutions to track, monitor, and evaluate for adaptation. This will aid more in terms of reporting for adaptation. Then in terms of the climate change bill, which I articulated on earlier on, there is still some strong gaps in terms of institutional strengthening, the issues of governance, coordination, collection of data, and data sharing agreements, among other issues, which is envisioned that it will be addressed when we have a climate change bill. Then there is also efforts to address those issues, like I said, when we come up with a climate change bill. And as it stands, we have made significant progress in terms of coming up with the bill, where the principles of the bill have been approved by the cabinet. And then now a draft bill is now in place and awaiting stakeholder consultation. Once it is in place, it will strengthen these institutional arrangements, data sharing agreements, ultimately establishing a national climate fund, supporting also enhanced monitoring and evaluation of adaptation, and hence enhancing our reporting. I think I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It was really elaborate, touching all the different elements, including maybe you could stop sharing, please. Yeah, thank you. Yes, touching the different elements of the institutional arrangement, how we have tried to do to approach the legal, and then the different reporting instruments. I think that was a very good country example that we can build on for BTR reporting. And I think it provides a very good guidance on what the presentation and the guidance in the MPGs I was trying to elaborate on, how we can report on the different sections A, B, and C. And I had one question that was for Malawi. They were asking that which type of cook stoves Malawi was using that culturally were not appreciated. Someone was asking, maybe Malawi will also answer in the chat so that we can manage time well. So if we do not have any question at this moment, I would like to share my screen so that we can have our quiz before we go to the next session. I'm going to share my screen so we can go to our quiz. We have in our quiz for today, we have 3 learning questions, and I will still request that we enter the code. You will let me know if you can see my presentation.
Not yet.
Can you see now?
Yes, now it's here, is there.
Yeah, thank you. So the instructions are here. I will wait to see how many players we have. Then I will go to the next slide. So the instructions are, you go to www.menti.com and then you enter the code 29359805. I will put this code in the chat for easy access. Yes, the code is 29359805. Yes, I have not seen any player. Kindly go to www.menti.com. Thank you for joining. I can see we have now many people have joined, many players. So I'll give it a few more minutes, like 1 minute, then I can go to the next slide, which will bring us our question and okay, our players. Yes, we have 9 players. Kindly follow the instructions, www.menti.com. The code is 29359805. We have 10 players. I think we can get ready. Yes, I know we are many, but you can get ready for the first question to manage time. So I'm going to go to the next question, to the first question. So all of us who will answer correct answers will get maximum points. So the question is, Section A of BTR asks countries to provide information on national communication on adaptation actions, institutional arrangements and governance and legal frameworks. Is this true or false? Kindly provide your answer. We have 30 minutes to our answer. So let's wait and see. We have 11 people who have answered. Let's wait for more people. Yes, only 1 second. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it is actually true that Section A of BTR requests for this information. Kindly take note of the information that is required, and let's see who got it right. Our players, yes, we have interesting names here. Yes, I think we have so many people who actually got it right. So we can go to question number 2. We have now over 15 players ready. So the second question is about question 2. I don't know why it is not giving us the second question. What is the problem? So this is the second question. I don't know why it is not showing us the second question when I go like this. But as you can see, the second question is about as adaptation reporting is a country-driven exercise. Countries should feel free to determine whether they want to do this or not. So I can see 2 players, but I don't know why when I put in the presentation mode, it doesn't give me the section on the screen. I don't know if you can see my screen and the question on your side.
Yeah, we can see the screen and also the answers. So you can maybe move to the third question.
Yeah, so, okay. So the third question is about Section B of BTR asks information on climate trends and vulnerabilities. Then B, methodologies, tools used, and then C, support received and support needed. So you can provide your answer. I don't know if it can still show. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, we cannot answer actually.
Oh, okay. Then there could be a problem. But you can see the question, of course, the correct answer is yes. Those are the sections that the different sections are asking in the bit according to the MPGs. as you saw in the presentation, and maybe without, I think there was a technical issue there. We shall do better in our next session. But maybe without taking a lot of your time on that, maybe it has been a point of reflection. Our next session is about the breakout groups. And my colleague, Sarjana, we shall be in 2 groups, and within the groups, that's where we shall choose people who will make presentations. So we shall have to go to the different rooms. It will take you to the room randomly, don't worry. And then each one of us, me and my colleague Sarjana, we shall provide a question which will be discussed just a few minutes, and then we shall come here in the plenary. We shall bring you back together in the plenary so that we can have one of you who will have been the secretary for the group to present. So I think we can now go to rooms. So I'm actually saying that we are going to create only 2 groups, and then we create, each one of you will automatically be allocated to the group. I hope you will see yourselves in the groups. Yes, so I'm opening
Actually,
the,
yeah. Actually, not yet.
yes, it's taking us to the group now. It is moving people to their assigned groups. So don't worry, it's making 1919. So I will go to group 2, you will go to group 1. As it's taking people, I can see over 20 people have already left. We are remaining with 9. So shortly, all of us will be in the different groups, and I'll go to group 2, you will go to group 1. We just have 7. When we get to 0, then we shall go. Yeah. We have 6, but I think we can move to the groups. Yeah, we have 5 now moving, waiting. I think we can move to the group, so we start, others will join. Maybe they might not be on their machines, that's why it is delaying. Sarjana, I'm moving to group 2, room 2 now. So
yeah, I'm moving to group 1. Okay,
All
probably
right.
these 6 people also will be appear in one of the groups.
They might not be on their computer. So
yeah,
let me
maybe.
move. Yeah,
Maybe we have the how many 10
we have the minutes.
yeah.
We shall do 5 minutes because the questions are not long. Yeah, so that we utilize the other 10 for the discussion. Okay. Okay,
see you in 5 minutes.
So maybe we shall start with room 1.
Yes, yes, we have a good discussion. Actually, countries provided some interesting information about their status of vulnerability assessment and assessing impacts and risks. So the Tanzania is just in the process of preparing their national adaptation plan and assessing actually now vulnerabilities. Most of the areas are already assessed. Also, Tanzania set or developed a climate adaptation master plan, and the geographic areas as prioritized as the most vulnerable. They are on geographic basis. So for Georgia, interesting information that in their BTR, the adaptation part is already prepared and is under the last review, so it's almost ready. But the representative of Georgia stated that they have many problems with the vulnerabilities and how to assess and they performed vulnerability assessment just from time to time, and there is lack of data consistency in order to properly assess all these vulnerable sectors. They have experience on vulnerability assessment in 3 areas as per geographic characteristics, but also noted one new area which is important. It's related to issues with floods, and they are now assessing the information on that and how to assess vulnerability related to new occurrence and new frequency of the floods. So as of the sectors, the most vulnerable sector from aspect of climate impact is agriculture. And they are now in context of the reducing the flood risk, they are designing the actually early warning system. Also, Rudy from Mauritius stated and said that they prioritized 8 key adaptation sectors from the aspect of the vulnerability, and the full vulnerability assessment has been done in different segments. So they are now have approved projects for national adaptation plan, preparation for the health sector, and also they are preparing a project proposal for the preparation of the national adaptation plan for the other areas. That was in short information that was provided by participants from the first group. Thank you, Sheila. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you so much. Apologies about that. Thank you so much. I will present the sharing from room 2. So we had a sharing experience from Montenegro about how they actually, the question was about where can information required to report on adaptation priorities and barriers and adaptation action be sourced from. So Montenegro's experience is that at first they had issues of identifying at first they have a group of experts who actually do conduct assessments and identify a list of issues, and for this case they had received support from UNDP. This exercise was done under support from UNDP to develop the national adaptation action for the country. And then among the list that was identified by experts, there were special issues also related to gender, because after that they subjected the list to gender assessment. And then the first list was sent to the National Council for the Sustainable Development. And this National Council is composed of different stakeholders, including NGOs, business sector, and independent experts. And then this national group convened, and then they made the priority list. Experiences from Liberia is that for them, they used a sectoral approach whereby the different sectors, including agriculture, fisheries, transport, industry, and forestry, convene and do stakeholder analysis among the different sectors, which means they have representation of the different stakeholders within the specific sectors. And then these meetings were also held at subnational levels to help them synthesize the issues that were identified at sector level. And then after a group of experts is convened at national level to identify priority adaptation priorities. So about Kenya, we also got examples from Kenya. He was not able to speak. But he mentioned that for them, key priority actions for adaptation are usually sourced from documents like NABS, NDC, and then the process for their national climate change, I think, adaptation plan. While for barriers are mainly sourced from the national communications and BOR. So that's what Group 2 managed to present from our side. But apart from that, I don't know if we have any other comments from the plenary. If you feel that maybe your views were not well represented, you can unmute your microphone as we wrap up and you give us what you think about the two groups and the two questions. But we have one question in the chat in the meantime from Benti from Ethiopia. He's asking, he's thanking the organizers. Yes, we also appreciate that you were able to attend and stay with us. The question is, he would like to get clarifications in terms of data on how many years of data would be used for vulnerability issues for the BTR reporting. I think my colleague Sarjana can talk about it, but this one will also be part of our frequently asked questions because it came out yesterday. Sarjana, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Benti, for the question. Yes, this issue is not specified within the MPGs for the how many years do you need data, backward data, in order to assess your vulnerability. So that's not specified. So as for other documents, for instance, for national adaptation plan processes or for your national communications, when you perform vulnerability assessment, the same methodology you use for BTR or same information. Actually, for BTR, you will use your last performed vulnerability assessment. So maybe it's from your last national communication or some other research that you have performed recently. So vulnerability will change with different circumstances in your country, with the change of the climate effects, etc., etc. So the most recent vulnerability study that you have, that information you will include in your BTR.
Thank you so much for that. So as we wrap up, I don't know if we have any comments. So thank you so much for joining us for today. Kindly go ahead and register. It is important for us to have you in our registration for easy communication, especially focusing on adaptation issues at our platform. So it would be nice that you register. The link is already provided in the chat. Kindly go ahead and register, and please let me know if you don't have the link. I also provided that yesterday. We shall only be registering once over this series, so it is fine if you registered yesterday. You don't have to register today, but would continuously encourage you to register if you have not registered. And then would also communicate that all these materials and the recordings for these webinars will be uploaded on our platform once we finish the webinars on Saturday, on Friday, because I hope they will be technically available. Yeah, thank you so much, and bye for now.
Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
You, Chief. Bye, colleagues.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.